After 11 months of devastating conflicts in Gaza, the UK has finally announced that it's suspending some arms export licences to Israel. I'm joined now by a human rights lawyer who's been at the heart of the case against the government, putting huge amounts of pressure on them to make this decision. Dearbhla Minogue, great to have you with us again.
Thank you for having me.
What's your reaction to the government finally making this decision to stop some arms sales to Israel?
We're very relieved to hear about this decision. It's taken too long. But it's very welcome. In fact, it's actually more significant than the government would like to make out based on its statement to Parliament yesterday. They've actually revoked all licenses that are capable of being used in Gaza, with the exception of these F-35 licenses that go via other countries. But the proportion 30 out of 350 is actually quite misleading, because what they've done is said anything that they assess could be used in Gaza is revoked.
I haven't yet seen a full breakdown of exactly what those 30 licenses are, but they've spoken in broad terms about some of the categories. Could you tell us, what types of arms equipment have now been suspended?
I've had a look on the government website because they haven't sent this information direct to us, but the government website indicates fighter jet parts, light arms, and other components, for example, anything used in targeting, they've all been revoked.
What role do you think your litigation and also the resignation of Mark Smith, this diplomat who was a specialist in arms sales to the Middle East, could have had on the government finally reaching this decision, and also the mounting revelations of torture in Israeli prisons of Palestinian detainees?
I think all of these factors have added up to create irresistible pressure on the government to revoke these licenses. I think something like torture is so inexcusable under international law that there's absolutely nowhere they could go once they recognised that detainees were being mistreated in this way. In particular, when we pointed out that information obtained through this torture from detainees was actually being used, in our view, in targeting decisions, which of course are being carried out with British fighter jets or parts from Britain. I think the resignation of the Foreign Office staff is extremely significant, and I think they just realised that if they came to court today without having made such a suspension, that they would have difficulty, knowing what to say to the court.
And the government have tried to kind of play down, like you say, the gravity of this decision. They put out this statistic that the UK supposedly only supplies 1% of Israel's arms imports. But on the other side, you've got groups like Labour Friends of Israel, Boris Johnson, who have condemned this decision, saying, this is helping Hamas, helping Iran, all this kind of thing. And then groups like Campaigning Against Arms Trade have pointed out that, well, the F-35, which is Israel's most advanced fighter jet, is exempt. And although this aircraft is supposed to be used against kind of peer adversaries like Iran, there was a report that came out yesterday from an NGO, I believe in Denmark, that showed conclusively Israel is using the F-35 to bombard Gaza, including a strike over the summer that killed around 90 people. How concerned are you that the F-35 isn't included in this suspension of export licenses?
I would be very concerned about that. It's something that we'll definitely be keeping under review. We'll be asking for more detail about that decision making. Because when you think about the test that's being applied, the test is whether there's a clear risk that the weapons or components might be used in a violation of international humanitarian law. They've obviously assessed that parts going to Israel do risk violating international law, and therefore I can't see any reason for them not to ultimately include the F-35 parts in their decision. I don't really know how they're justifying that. I can see how politically they want to justify it because of the other allies that supposedly need these parts, but at the end of the day there's a legal test at play here, and I think that their decision falls foul of it.
I'll just show our viewers a clip of John Healey on the BBC this morning giving his reasons why they couldn't suspend those licenses.
It's a deliberate and important carve-out for these modern fighter jets. These are not just jets that the UK or Israel uses. 20 countries and around 1,000 of these jets around the world. And the UK makes important critical components for all those jets that go into a global pool. So it's, first of all, hard to distinguish those that may go into Israeli jets. And secondly, this is a global supply chain with the UK a vital part of that supply chain, and we're not prepared to put at risk the operation of fighter jets that are central to our own UK security, that of our allies and of NATO.
John Healey seems to be saying that, because of the relationship of our allies, there's a consortium of lots of European countries, I think possibly Japan as well, involved in the F-35, that if they suspended the export of parts to Israel, it wouldn't just affect Israel, affect all these other allies. Of course, you're a lawyer, the law is your expertise, but in cases like this, you know they're highly political. It's one thing for the UK to kind of stand up to a small country like Israel, but to stand up to the US, which is kind of a major partner in the F-35 programme, is obviously another ballgame altogether. Do you think that's partly why the UK isn't taking that step?
I think so, for sure. I think there was even a threat from Trump's team in recent days suggesting that it would cause difficulties for the special relationship. So I think there are serious political considerations at play for the UK. But I think those need to be set aside when the legal test is being applied, and also just the morality of this. I mean, all these allies should be concerned that there's a genocide taking place that they're participating in, rather than whether they can get away with something through legal or political reasoning.
And you're back in court this morning, despite the government's announcement yesterday. Can you explain to people what's going to happen now with the court case that's been going on for many months?
This hearing is largely procedural. There's a lot of procedural things that need to be addressed by the judge in terms of timetabling, when the ultimate hearing is going to take place. I don't think a decision will necessarily be made today on when the final hearing is going to happen, or to what extent it will proceed, given that they've revoked these licenses. My view is based on the public summary of the decision that the challenge does need to go ahead, because they haven't departed significantly from the previous government's methodology, which in our view was wildly defective. So it remains to be seen, but it's largely procedural today.
Well, thanks for joining us this morning and giving us this update. If people haven't subscribed already to our channel, please click the button below, and I'll put a link to Al-Haq and GLAN, which are the organisations that Dearbhla is representing today. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. Thanks very much.